Hey all, Hipper here. So if you're one of those players who think that just parking your cruiser with a damage build is, a challenge, then I'm here to say that you are wrong. Cruisers are inherently not difficult to play. They're about the same as battleships, in my opinion. What is difficult to play, on the other hand, is an agile cruiser, which is pretty much the opposite of a normal cruiser build. And right here, I'm just showing you what I consider Cleveland play here. Just, using that thin armor to troll everybody and just set fires. That's it. You don't even have to do anything useful for the team. You'll get a good XP amount just by doing damage, really. And that's not what agile cruisers are about. So let's just go through one little paragraph here. Like, an agile cruiser has to contend with all the same issues as a traditional cruiser, except to consistently, and consistently is the key word here, to consistently perform well in an agile cruiser, it has to be more aggressive, be closer to the action, tank more incoming shots, and provide more soft support, all the while lacking the ability to disengage as easily as normal cruisers due to their worse concealment, and also lacking the DPM and the range of traditional builds. So an agile cruiser build is far more difficult, and you can have lucky battles in it, but to consistently perform well, you have to be an elite player. And while I'm at it, I'll just once again try to dispel this myth here that agile cruisers, all they do is kite, or they are kiting cruisers. That is not true. An agile cruiser doesn't kite any more than a traditional cruiser. It's the last resort when you are getting overrun, and that's really it. And even the name agile cruisers, I gave them that, but I probably should have thought a little bit more about it, because it kind of puts too much emphasis on the rudder part. But agile cruiser, tanking cruiser, capping cruiser, or tactical cruiser. I actually like tactical cruiser. But anyway, let's just go through a build here of a tactical cruiser or agile cruiser and a strategic or a more normal cruiser. So I've picked Rochester for this comparison here because it's not a ship that is particularly good as an agile cruiser, and is also not particularly good as a traditional cruiser. So this is a damage build or DPM build with Norman Scott using Mimbelli for improved reload. And then in this slot here, I have Mikawa for better detectability. You can also put like another damage inspiration on, but it's not going to change the overall score anyway. So beyond range, you need more range. That's like this damage build. The longer you can reach, the better. HE, better HB, better AP, and better grouping and dispersion here. And of course, refill station for 10% faster reload. So fully focused on doing damage, and I believe this is the build that most people run on the American cruisers actually. So I've tried to pick a build that's actually realistic here. Like I said, you can switch Mikawa for a damage inspiration, but it's not going to make much of a difference. So if we look on the ship itself, so in the first modification slot we have the aiming systems mod 1 for better dispersion. And that's about it. Then we have the propulsion mod, so you can juke back and forth, avoiding shots that way if you like that. Concealment system, so you can improve your concealment and your incoming fire dispersion. This is pretty much a given on DPM or traditional cruisers. And in the end, we have the main battery reload time here. You can also go with more range, but I usually go with the reload here, and I think most people do that as well. So because we don't have fully packed on this build here, we only get 2 of each utility here. Defensive AA, you get 2 of them. Sonar, you only get 2 of them. Smoke, you also only get 2 of them. You can also pick heal, of course. But for this damage build here, I say smoke is the right pick. But again, you only get 2. So your utility is already down by 33%. Anyway, these are the stats for a full offensive build here on the Rochester. 76 artillery, maneuverability is 64, pretty bad, and concealment is 60. So it's a little bit of everything, mostly into artillery. Like I said, I'll show you here in a minute. If you pick, one more offensive inspiration instead of the concealment, it is going to change the stats just a little bit. So say we put Yamamoto on instead of Mikawa, we get the artillery up by 1 point additional, from 76 to 77. And that's, I think, the highest you can get on Rochester. But on the other hand, your concealment will go down to 56 from 60 with the other build. So you're giving up a little bit there. And overall, the other build is better if we are talking about, points. Alright, let's put an Agile build on the same ship here. So I'm using Beebley. You could use Kincaid, it doesn't really matter because it's the exact same perks. So here I have my inspiration is Müller for speed, and I also have Baltimore for rudder. And Ingenious, very important in Agile cruisers. You cannot play an Agile cruiser without it, so don't try. And in the next level, you have full speed ahead, gives you more speed and rudder. Velocious, more speed, steer clear, gives you rudder shift and steering repair gear time. And then of course you have to pick fully packed here. That's a hallmark of Agile cruisers. It's all about utility, it's all about helping. So you will need 3 of every consumable on your ship. And let's just have a look at the ship while we are here. So this is different to the DPM build here. We have the same in slot 1, but then we have steering gears in slot 2, and steering gears again in slot 4, and then we have the same main battery mod in slot 4 here. We get 3 defensive fires, 3 sonars, very handy, and we get 3 smokes. But for an Agile build, I would pick a heal actually, but for the ease of comparison, I've just left it at smoke. So here we get the artillery at 72. So what's that? 4 to 5 below, not a lot really. A defense will be the same. Maneuverability is all the way up at 91, and concealment is stuck at 48. But it's not really that much worse than the other build when you think about it. But again, if you change the inspirations a little bit, you can actually tune the agility even more. So if you take away Baltimore and put another speed inspiration there, you can get the maneuverability up to 94 on Rochester here. I don't do that because it's not usually the build I run, and I don't want to manipulate this, like the results here. I want to do what I actually usually do. So I'm going to keep it at 91, but really maneuverability would be between 91 to 94 depending on what you choose. So what I chose here is simply adding Fraser as an inspiration instead of Baltimore, which is a totally valid reason. It's still an Agile cruiser, as long as you have double rudder on the ship and fully packed. So if we compare the concealment then first here with the Agile cruiser at the bottom and like the standard DPM cruiser at the top, you can see that the concealment score is 60 for the DPM cruiser and 48 for the Agile cruiser. This may look like a big handicap, but I'll get into that later, and it really isn't, because in Agile cruisers, you don't care at all about your concealment. It doesn't matter at all. While on the other hand, a DPM cruiser, your concealment is very important, and one of the most important stats here. So the difference here is 12 in points. In kilometers, it's about 2, but 12 points really isn't a lot if we're looking at this in an objective manner, which we are. So next up, let's look at the artillery. And look at this difference here. The Agile cruiser has 72, and the DPM cruiser has 76. That's a difference of a measly 4. And you can see the stats are obviously different, like the reload is faster on the DPM build and the range is longer. But what you can see is the improved precision and dispersion. But of course that is included in the artillery score, and still you are only upping it by 4, which is it's very, very little. You're not getting a lot out of that build there, to be honest. And you're basically giving up 33% of your utility for this 4 point increase in artillery, which is it's almost negligible. So let's move on and compare maneuverability here, and this is where the Agile cruiser just blows the traditional cruiser out of the water. The traditional cruiser has a maneuverability, like an overall maneuverability, all things considered, of 64, which is pretty bad, but that's okay because it's not what you want out of that build. The Agile cruiser, on the other hand, has a minimum of 91, and remember you can get that up to 94 if you prioritize speed over rudder. And what's the difference here? Let's just see it again. For this exact comparison here on the screen, the difference is a whopping 27. Just say that again, 27. The concealment difference is like 12. And if you include the artillery difference between the two, you will get 16. And that's really only half of what you get out of having a full maneuverability build. So, well, I'll just leave you with that, and you can think about that for a while. So in the meantime, I'll just go through some of the differences between Agile cruisers and let's just call them DPM cruisers in this comparison here. And in this example, the blue cruiser is the Agile cruiser and the gray cruiser is the more traditional DPM cruiser, whatever you want to call it really. So this is the shards map, and I picked the sea spawn, and I think it is the spawn where it's the easiest to explain what the difference is between the two cruisers. And also you might notice here, there is no kiting involved here at any point. The two cruisers have the same objective, defend the cap, throw destroyers out, and be as useful as possible. But you can see the blue cruiser, the Agile cruiser, is generally, well, not generally, but always faster than the traditional cruiser. So it's going to get ahead and it's going to approach the enemy faster than the gray cruiser. Because the Agile cruiser also has worse concealment than the gray cruiser, and the fact that the Agile cruiser is also in front of the traditional cruiser, it means that the Agile cruiser is going to get spotted first, or in sometimes way before the gray cruiser ever gets spotted. So that's where the Agile build comes in. It's not for kiting, it is to dodge and weave those incoming salvos that are going to, get thrown at you while you are still pushing ahead. You want to do a land grab, basically. And instead of using concealment, you are using agility to perform the same task. So an added benefit to the Agile cruiser is that since you don't care about concealment, because usually you always spot it anyway, it means that you can fire even when it's dangerous to do so, because you can dodge and weave and still, push without having to worry too much about incoming fire. 4-5 ships shooting at you at once, that's doable in an Agile cruiser. Any more than that, and it starts to get a little hairy. A traditional cruiser doesn't have the ability to dodge and weave, at least not to the same degree as an Agile cruiser, and generally has to hold fire because it relies on concealment. So this picture here explains the difference between the two cruiser schools fairly clearly, I think. They both have the same objective, except the Agile cruiser is, like I said in the beginning of this video here, more aggressive, closer to the enemy, and just generally in a more precarious situation, higher risk, and also much higher difficulty. So what you want to do in an Agile cruiser is to put those consumables to good use, because remember, you have 3 of them as opposed to the traditional cruiser who only has 2. So let's, for the sake of argument, say that the 2 cruisers here are Wishitas and they both have radar. Because the Agile cruiser has grabbed more land, has pushed further, that radar is more valuable because he can radar targets much further away. Say that, for example, if the destroyer had left the cap and was hiding somewhere in open water, it can still be radared. Now, should the Agile cruiser only have access to sonar, which is pretty common, because the Agile cruiser is a more aggressive cruiser, has generally, not always, but generally pushed further ahead, the sonar is so much more useful because you can, for example, see here, it actually has longer range than the radar into the enemy territory, and I can get all around the island here, exposing any destroyers lurking outside the cap. So that is pretty much the main difference between the two cruiser types. And as you can see, it has nothing to do with kiting. Again, I'm using this map here as an example, but Agile cruisers can generally get into better positions than traditional cruisers, but it's also more risky, and you are depending a little bit more on your team, at least in the opening minutes of the battle. For example, here on Shards, the Agile cruiser has many more opportunities to defend this cap here than the grey traditional cruiser does. Another hallmark of most Agile cruisers, or at least the best Agile cruisers, is that they are always equipped with torpedoes. And that's exactly for this reason. And again, I'm using Shards to visualize this. Of course, it's not the same for every map and every situation. But because you're in this exposed position here and you are relying on your team to help you out, torpedoes are a necessary evil. Or not an evil, but they are necessary. Simply because you are sort of on your own, at least a lot more on your own than the grey traditional cruiser is. So once it's time to reposition, the Agile cruiser can also generally take a more direct route than the traditional cruiser. And this is like an example where kiting comes into play. For example, if you have to go from C to B and you have to dodge some shots like during that voyage, you can take a more direct route in the Agile cruiser where you don't rely so much on cover. You can also generally shoot while repositioning because, like I said earlier, concealment is of no importance to an Agile cruiser, while on the other hand, as a more traditional cruiser has to be a little bit careful with when they open fire if they're in a precarious situation, and they also aren't able to angle their armor as quickly as an Agile cruiser can. So let's just put both cruisers up against each other here, and I'll go through every line here. So the Agile cruiser in general, and this is like super general of course, takes the initiative, while the DPM cruiser is more of a wait and see approach here. And Agile cruisers, they're high risk, high reward, and if you make a mistake or you overextend or anything like that, it's hard to recover. While a DPM cruiser is more of a balanced approach, more of a balanced risk. If you make a mistake, you can go dark, you can recover, it's at least a lot easier to do. And yeah, a more tactical approach is probably a nice way of putting the Agile approach, while the DPM is more of a strategic approach. I'll get into more detail later. And Agile cruisers excels at support and capping, while DPM cruisers excels at damage and positioning. Agile cruisers are far more difficult to play, while DPM cruisers are less challenging. Let's be honest here, that's the truth. After all, there is a reason you don't see too many double rudder radar Minotaurs out there. So resource hungry Agile cruisers are extremely resource hungry. Like, they really need your commanders at a very, very high level to be feasible, really. Like, you need them, level 16-4 in most cases. DPM cruisers are not as resource hungry. I mean, you can really play them with most commanders and you don't need them super high. Of course, it's better if you do. So Agile cruisers, because they're so difficult, they require like a lot more like situational awareness, and like you need to reevaluate much more frequently than you do in a traditional cruiser. And lastly, Agile cruisers are an entirely different class, while DPM cruisers, they're pretty much just a copy-paste from the PC version. And the PC version has no such thing as Agile cruisers. It's simply not doable on PC. I think Wichita is the only ship on PC that you can just make Agile, or at least into my definition of Agile, which is a rudder below 3 seconds. But I think that's the only ship. So Agile cruisers, they don't exist on PC. They only exist in Legends. They don't exist in Blitz either. So therefore, you have to think about them as an entirely different class with an entirely different purpose than a traditional cruiser. And that's where most people go wrong. They play Agile cruisers kind of like DPM cruisers, or they play them like ridiculous kiting cruisers and think they're doing the right thing. And I mean, nothing could be further from the truth. So just to finish off here, traditional cruisers are more strategic. Like, it's more like a I want to win the battle approach, while an agile cruiser, you have to make those re-evaluations a lot more often than you have to do in a DPM cruiser. Probably every 2 minutes, well, probably even less than that. Anyway, I'm not going to put a number on it, but you certainly have to have a lot more considerations going through your head than you have to do in a traditional cruiser. And that's why agile cruisers are so difficult to consistently do well in. And in my opinion, are really only for elite players who have already mastered the essential of the DPM cruiser, which it's not like it's just a traditional cruiser build on PC. As when you master that, you can move into the next layer, which in my opinion is the agile cruisers. So anyway, just finishing off on the screen here, and hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you out there.